You're watching the MMA Oracles Podcast, and now, presenting your host, Jack Moon.
This is the MMA Oracles Podcast, and I am your host, Jack Moon, and UFC 300 is here. I am pumped for this card, so I'm just going to get right into it. The first fight of the night sees two former champions facing off as Davison Deuce de Guerra Figueiredo is taking on Cody No Love Garbrandt. Figueiredo is 36 years old. He is 22-3-1 overall with 9 knockouts, 8 submissions, and 5 decisions. He is the former UFC flyweight champion. He's currently 11-3-1 in the UFC, and his best wins have been over Jared Brooks, John Moraga, Alexandre Pantoja, who's the current UFC flyweight champ, Tim Elliott, Joseph Benavidez twice, Alex Pereira, Brandon Moreno, Rob Font. He's got brutal knockout power. He's a talented striker, and he is a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. On the other side, Garbrandt is 32 years old. He is 14-5 overall with 11 knockouts and 3 decisions. He is the former UFC bantamweight champion. He is also an NCAA Division II wrestler. He's got a great team behind him at Team Alpha Male. He is currently 9-5 in the UFC, and his best wins have been over Augusto Mendez, Thomas Almeida, Takeya Mizugaki, Dominic Cruz, Rafael Assunção, and Brian Kelleher. He also has brutal knockout power and some really slick boxing when he is at his best. Figueiredo is coming into this fight as a minus 300 favorite, with Garbrandt coming back as a plus 240 underdog. There's currently 3,829 Tapology votes on the fight. 79% of those are favoring Figueiredo, with 70% taking him to win by knockout. Of the 21% taking Garbrandt, 69% of those are taking him to win by knockout. I do think this is a great way to start off the card. I'm agreeing with the fans here. I do think this fight is most likely to end in a knockout in either direction. Garbrandt did call for this fight. He's coming off back-to-back wins. It seems like he's got his confidence back. He talked about working with a sports psychologist, and that most of his downfall was the mental part of his game, and he seems like he's back in it now. But I do think this is a situation of kind of be careful what you wish for with this matchup. Garbrandt, he's coming off 2 wins, but he beat Trevin Jones, who literally did nothing in that fight. Like, that was an extremely boring fight. Trevin Jones just did nothing. And he was cut after that because it was such a terrible fight. They just let him go. And then he beat Brian Kelleher, who is a crafty veteran, but Kelleher was coming off a 1.5-year layoff with serious injuries. He's also 37 years old. He hasn't won a fight since January of 22, and the only UFC win that he has that's over a fighter that's even still on the roster was a win over flyweight Ode Osborne, who he beat in January of 2020. So not really the best fighter either. Figueiredo is 36 years old, so I am worried about his age a little bit. Father Time, beats everyone, and that is a bit of a worrying factor for me in this fight. But he moved up to bantamweight in his last fight, defeated Rob Font. He looked really good. I think that was a good sign that he can still compete at the highest levels, even at 135 pounds. Before Garbrandt's last 2 wins, he was on a 1-5 streak. 4 of those losses were bad knockouts. The guy just doesn't have a chin. His best win was that one over Dominic Cruz, where he looked super evasive, really didn't get hit, and Dominic Cruz has pillow hands, so if he did get hit, I think he might have been okay. But after that, we saw him get knocked out twice by TJ Dillashaw. He just was getting knocked out by everybody after that. Turned out that if you can hit him, he can't take it. So to me, that looks really bad in a matchup against a power puncher like Figueiredo. I do like Garbrandt's chances, like I mentioned, with his mental game shift. I do think that is a good sign for him, because his mental game was part of his downfall. He had a really big ego. It seems like he still kind of does. Like when he gets hurt, he'll just start brawling. He throws all defense out the window. He just starts winging power shots, and most of the time he ends up getting knocked out because of it. The way he's talking, super confident, I think it's good and bad for him. I think it's good in the sense that he's going to get back in there with that confidence and he's going to be using his head movement and fighting to the best of his ability. But I also think that means he's going to be walking into the power shots coming back at him. And I think he's going to get into that sort of ego again where he's sort of overconfident and he's going to take Figueiredo a little bit lightly here. I just don't like Garbrandt's chin. I think if Figueiredo can hit him, it's going to be over. So even if Garbrandt's having success, all it's going to take is one shot. One shot, Cody Garbrandt's lights are going to be out or he's going to be rocked and he's going to go into do or die mode and it's going to be die. So, I like Figueiredo in this fight. Give me, for the official pick, Davison Figueiredo by knockout in the first round. For the second fight on the night, we have a lightweight pairing between Bobby King Green taking on Jim A10 Miller. Green is 37 years old. He is 31, 15, and 1 overall with 11 knockouts, 9 submissions, and 11 decisions. He is a former 2-division champ in King of the Cage. He is a purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He went 4-1 in Strikeforce before coming to the UFC, where he is 12, 10, and 1. Best wins of his career have come over Darren Cruikshank, Jacob Volkman, James Krause, Pat Healy, Josh Thompson, Eric Koch, Clay Guida, Alan Patrick, Ali Quinta, Nasrat Hakparast, Tony Ferguson, and Grant Dawson. Green has some really slick boxing. He's got a really good jab. He seems like he could go into pro boxing if he wanted to. He's got that level of boxing and footwork. He also has some surprising grappling ability. We've seen him win some fights by submission. Even submitted Tony Ferguson recently. So you can't take him lightly anywhere the fight goes. He's going to be taking on Miller, who is 40 years old. Miller's 37 and 17 overall with 7 knockouts, 20 submissions, and 10 decisions. He is a former CFFC champ, USKBA kickboxing champ. He holds multiple UFC records just for amount of fights, fight time, things like that. He is a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, an NCAA Division I wrestler. He's currently 26 and 16 in the UFC, where his best wins have been over Matt Lyman, Mac Danzig at UFC 100, Dwayne Ludwig, Mark Bocek, Gleason Tybau, Charles Oliveira, Kamal Shalarus, Melvin Gillard, Joe Lozon twice, Danny Castillo, Takanori Gomi, who he beat at UFC 200, Thiago Alves, Clay Guida, Donald Cerrone, Gabriel Benitez. He also has some good boxing and obviously super high-level grappling. Black belt in jiu-jitsu, 20 submission wins on his record. And the guy is just tough as nails. He is always there to fight. That's why he is a fan favorite. Going into this fight, Green is sitting at a minus 190 favorite, with Miller coming back as a plus 160 underdog. There's currently 3,761 Tapology votes on the fight. 60% of those are actually favoring Miller, with 36% taking him to win by decision. Of the 40% taking Green, 68% are taking him to win by decision. Fans are favoring Miller. I think the story of him competing at UFC 100, 200, and now 300 and potentially getting wins at all of those has kind of become larger than life and started to sway those votes. I also think that, Bobby Green was knocked out pretty badly. It was a late stoppage in his last fight, and it was only 4 months ago. So there is some concern about that, and I think that's starting to sway people to pick Miller as well as Bobby Green. He's getting up there in age as well. Miller's older than him, but Miller seems to have old man strength, and he's trucking on. There was talks that this was going to be his retirement fight, but he's pushed past that and he, wants to keep going. And he looks good enough to keep doing so. So, um, that being said, I don't like the matchup for him really. Miller, he got outstruck somewhat recently by Alexander Hernandez. Bobby Green's a much better striker than Alexander Hernandez. Um, he's going to be the much better striker in this pairing as well. He throws a lot more volume. He's got a great jab. He's more accurate. He's better defensively as well. And he has more power. So, and we've seen him. Bobby Green also has really excellent takedown defense. So I think it's going to be tough for Jim Miller to close the distance on him. And even if he does, it's going to be tough then to get him to the floor as well. So, and like I said, we saw Tony Ferguson start to grapple with him, and Tony Ferguson ended up getting submitted. So you can't really count Green out in the grappling either. So, yeah, I like Green everywhere in this fight, really. The recent knockout does worry me. Like I said, that was only 4 months ago. So there is some concern that if Miller, Miller at this later stage in his career, he's lost a little bit of speed, but I think he's gained some power. In a lot of his recent fights, you really see him just kind of throwing everything into a lot of his punches, and he's definitely scored some knockouts. So if he lands a shot, he might be able to put Green out. But I think Green is just really good defensively, and I think he's going to be able to pick Miller apart on the feet. There is a little bit of worry now that $300,000 bonuses are on the line that Green kind of gets outside of himself, chasing a finish, and ends up getting countered. But if he fights smart and fights to the game plan, I think he outpoints Jim Miller and takes a decision victory here. So for the official pick, give me Bobby Green by unanimous decision. Next up, we have a sort of a bathroom break fight, probably the worst fight on the UFC 300 card, as Jessica Batistaca Andrade is taking on Marina Rodriguez. Andrade is 32 years old. She is 25-12 overall with 10 knockouts, 8 submissions, and 7 decisions. She is the former UFC Women's Strawweight champ. She holds multiple UFC records in the women's divisions. She is a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and one of the hardest hitting women on the roster, no matter the weight class. She is currently 16-10 in the UFC. Best wins of her career have been over Milana Dudieva, Rosie Sexton, Raquel Pennington, Larissa Pacheco, Jessica Penne, Joanne Wood, Angela Hill, Claudia Gadelha, Tisha Torres, Carolina Kovalevich, Rose Namajunas, Katlyn Sermonara, Amanda Lemos, Lauren Murphy, and Mackenzie Dern. She's pretty much fought everybody, and she fought at bantamweight, at flyweight, and strawweight as well. On the other side, Rodriguez is 36 years old. She is 17-3-2 overall with 7 knockouts, 1 submission, and 9 decisions. She is a purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, a dark blue belt with black tip in Muay Thai, and Muay Thai rankings get it together with they have dark blue belts with black tips, they have black belts, they have black prajeeds. You're going to hear me mention some of these, going through some of these fights. I'm sure people who are more versed in Muay Thai than me understand this ranking system, but it just seems overly complicated and stupid. So get it together there, Muay Thai. Rodriguez is currently 7-3-2 in the UFC. Her best wins of her career have come over Natalia Silva, Jessica Aguilar, Tisha Torres, Amanda Ribas, Michelle Watterson twice, Mackenzie Dern, and Xiaonan Yan. At the time of writing this, both fighters were sitting at a minus 110. I've seen that line shift a little bit in Andrade's favor. Currently, there's 3,593 Tapology votes on the fight. 62% of those are favoring Andrade, with 48% taking her to win by knockout. Of the 38% taking Rodriguez, 73% are taking her to win by decision. I'm really not that excited about this fight. Like I said, it's probably the worst fight on the UFC 300 card. I think If you do need a break at any point, this would be the fight to take it. Andrade, I've seen people picking Rodriguez for this fight, and I get it. But the more I looked at it, the more I was favoring Andrade. Andrade isn't a fighter who really loses many decisions. If you look at her losses, most of her losses are finishes. She either gets caught with big shots or she gets overwhelmed by a grappler who ends up submitting her. Neither of which I see Rodriguez being able to do. Rodriguez is more of a volume striker. 73% of the fans predicting her to win are predicting her to win by decision. Over half of her pro wins are by decision. And I just think we've seen Andrade deal with volume strikers in the past. You know, she beat Angela Hill. She beat Karolina Kowalkiewicz. She beat Tisha Torres. She beat Katlyn Sermonara, who's like the most obvious volume striker for any women's fighter. That's all she does. She doesn't finish fights at all. And she defeated all of them. So Rodriguez, I think, is going to have to do something outside of her normal. I think she's going to have to catch Andrade with a big shot and shake her up to get this victory. Otherwise, if she kind of goes into her normal game plan and is just throwing volume, I don't know if that's going to be enough to beat a fighter like Andrade. Rodriguez is taller as well. She's the taller fighter, and Andrade does land some good body shots to taller fighters. She does some good work in the clinch. I think if there is a finish, I would probably actually expect it to favor Andrade. I think Andrade is obviously the more powerful fighter. She can land those big shots and potentially put Rodriguez away. But I like her to win the rounds too. I think she's just going to have the bigger moments of the fight. Like I said, I don't think Rodriguez is going to be able to do anything to shake Andrade up and take her out of her game and make her fight Rodriguez's fight. I think Rodriguez is going to end up fighting Jessica Andrade's style of fight. So, yeah, for the official pick, give me Jessica Andrade by unanimous decision. Next up on the card, we have a lightweight pairing between Jalen the Tarantula Turner taking on Renato Money Moicano. Turner is 28 years old. He is 14-7 overall with 10 knockouts and 4 submissions. He is a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He's got a really good team behind him at RVCA with head coach Jason Perillo. He is a finisher. Obviously, he has stopped all of his pro wins. He's a huge lightweight at 6'3". He's got one-shot knockout power, tricky submissions with his long limbs. He went 2-0 in Bellator, 1-0 in the Contender Series, and he's currently 7-4 in the UFC. Best wins of his career have been over Gabe Green, Josh Kulabau, Uros Medic, Jamie Malarkey, Brad Riddell, and Bobby Green. On the other side, Moicano is 34 years old. He is 18-5-1 overall with 10 submissions and 8 decisions. He is the former Jungle Fight champion. He is a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, a black belt in Muay Thai. He does train at American Top Team, one of the best gyms in the world there. He's got a super dangerous submission game. He's got good striking as well. He's a black belt in Muay Thai. The guy can definitely strike, but it just seems like he doesn't have a lot of stopping power. 0 knockout wins on the record. He is currently 10-5 in the UFC, where his best wins of his career have come over Iliarde Santos, Ismail Bonfim, Zubaira Tukhugov, Jeremy Stevens, Calvin Kattar, Cub Swanson, Brad Riddell, and Drew Dober. Going into this fight, Turner is the favorite, sitting at minus 225, with Moicano coming back as a plus 185 underdog. There is currently 3,551 Tapology votes on the fight. 76% of those are favoring Turner, with 75% taking him to win by knockout. Of the 24% taking Moicano, 46% are taking him to win by submission. A lot of people seem to be counting Moicano out. I see most picks favoring Turner. 76% of that fan votes favoring Turner. A lot of analysts are taking him as well. But I think it's a mistake to really count Moicano out. He's obviously faced dangerous strikers before, and he's had success. I also think Turner is a bit overrated, in my opinion. His all-offense style does leave him open to be countered. His striking defense really isn't that good. Unfortunately for Moicano, that's really the thing that he hasn't shown that he's been able to exploit. Like I said, his striking's good, but the power is just not there. And Turner's chin seems pretty decent. I mean, you can hit him and you can win rounds on him. So there may be a path forward there for Moicano. I think Moicano can have some success in the clinch as well. I don't think Turner is that good in the clinch. But Turner's takedown defense is really good. He's also got a height and reach advantage on Moicano, so even getting into the clinch is going to be a problem. Closing the distance is going to be a problem. Turner is the definitely more dangerous striker. Moicano is pretty durable himself. I mean, we've seen him eat a lot of shots and in fights and keep coming. So I wouldn't be shocked if he can eat some of the shots from Turner and get in on him and start clinching. Moicano is definitely an underdog that I wouldn't mind maybe tossing a bet on, but because like I said, I do see Turner as being overrated, but the power and size of Turner and what he was able to do to Bobby Green in his last fight, it really worries me here. I think for Moicano to have success in this fight, he's gonna have to come forward. He's gonna have to pressure Jalen Turner, and he's gonna have to try to close that distance. And that's gonna mean walking through some of those power shots. And I just don't know if his chin's gonna hold up to that. We have seen him be stopped before, and I think Jalen Turner is gonna be able to stop him again. So for the official pick, give me Jalen Turner by knockout in the first round. Next up, the featherweights take the cage here as Super Sadiq Yusuf is taking on Diego Lopes. Yusuf is 30 years old. He is 13-3 overall with 6 knockouts, 1 submission, and 6 decisions. He is a blue belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He's got a good team behind him at Team Lloyd Irvin. He's a really explosive athlete and a very good striker. He's currently 6-2 in the UFC. Best wins of his career so far have been over Mike Davis, Shaman Moraes, Gabriel Benitez, Andre Fili, and Alex Caceres. He is taking on Lopes, who is 29 years old. He is 23-6 overall with 9 knockouts, 12 submissions, and 2 decisions. Lopes is the former Lux champ. He is the former FFC champ, former XFL champ, former JFL champ. He picked up a bunch of regional titles. He is a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He is 2-1 in the UFC currently, but he went 0-1 in ACB. He also went 0-1 on the Contender Series. Best wins of his career so far have been over Honey Jason, Marco Beltran, Masio Fullen, Gavin Tucker, and Pat Sabatini. Going into this fight, Lopes is the favorite at minus 140, with Yusuf coming back as a plus 115 underdog. There's currently 3,696 Tapology votes on the fight. 80% of those are favoring Lopes, with 55% of those taking him to win by submission. Of the 20% taking Yusuf, 68% are taking him to win by decision. The more I looked at this fight, the more I'm actually loving Yusuf as an underdog here. I think he's the much more proven product. If you look at Lopes, the best wins of his career are over UFC washouts. I mean, this guy beat Hani Jason, former tough Brazil guy, not in the UFC anymore, obviously. Marco Beltran, former tough Latin America guy, not in the UFC anymore. Masio Fullen, same thing. He beat Gavin Tucker, who's 37 years old, who hasn't won a fight since 2020. He was also coming off a 2.5-year-long layoff going into that fight. And then he beat Pat Sabatini, whose striking just sucks. I mean, this guy, he got knocked out by Damon Jackson in the first round as well. So knocking out Pat Sabatini doesn't do much for me. I wanted to see more grappling in that fight. Obviously, that didn't happen. Lopes is wild though. I do think he has the X factor here. Is I think he can kind of surprise Yusuf. Yusuf is a much more technical and well put together fighter, and so it's going to be interesting how he handles the kind of buzzsaw blitz attack that is Diego Lopes. Diego Lopes kind of throws some unorthodox attacks as well. So Yusuf is going to have to be careful, but I think Yusuf is like I said, much more technical guy. He is the better striker. He throws a lot more volume with his strikes as well. He's a lot better defensively. Um, and he's almost as accurate as well with his strikes while throwing more he throws more combination. He throws a good amount of volume, and he's landing at a better rate technically because he's throwing more. So Lopes does have the advantage on the ground. If he can get it there, I think he can definitely give Yusuf a lot of problems on the floor. But over his 3 UFC fights so far, we've only seen him officially shoot for 1 takedown and fail to get it. So Yusuf has pretty solid takedown defense as well. It's at like 60%, but 60% is not bad. And, against a guy who's not really going for him, looks pretty good to me. So, yeah, I think Yusuf should be able to keep the fight where he wants it, win those striking exchanges by, kind of just being the more technical, more put together fighter who's landing more and better defense. Yeah, I see no downside really in taking Yusuf here. So, for the official pick, give me Sadiq Yusuf by unanimous decision. Up next, we have a high-profile women's fight here as Holly, the preacher's daughter, Holm is welcoming Kayla Harrison to the UFC. Holm is 42 years old. She is 15-6 overall with 8 knockouts and 7 decisions. She is the former UFC Women's Bantamweight Champion, the former Legacy FC Champ, a 3-division boxing world champion with 16 title defenses, a former IKF champ. She's a blue belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. She's got a great team behind her at Jackson Wink MMA. She went 1-0 in Bellator. She's currently 8-6 in the UFC. Best wins of her career so far have been over Raquel Pennington twice, who is the current women's bantamweight champion, Marion Renault, Ronda Rousey, obviously, Betch Correa, Megan Anderson, Irene Aldana, and Yana Santos. She will be taking on Harrison, who is 33 years old. She is 16-1 overall with 6 knockouts, 6 submissions, and 4 decisions. She is the 2019 and 2021 PFL champion, a 2-time Olympic gold medalist in judo. She's also won 19 other gold medals in judo competitions. She is a 6th Dan black belt in judo. She trains at American Top Team, one of the best teams in the world. She went 1-0 in Invicta and 15-1 in PFL. And the best wins of her career so far have been over Larissa Pacheco twice, Cindy Dandoise, and Aspen Ladd. Harrison is making her UFC debut here as a minus 480 favorite over Holm, who is coming back as a plus 340 underdog. There is currently 3,689 Tapology votes on the fight. 83% of those are favoring Harrison, with 58% taking her to win by decision. Of the 17% taking Holm, 72% are taking her to win by decision. When I'm looking at this fight, Harrison really hasn't beaten any good competition, and she has a major weight cut ahead of her. So I do think picking her is risky, yeah, especially at minus 480. Holm could be a good underdog if you feel strongly on that. I would probably wait until Friday and see how Harrison handles the weight cut as well. Obviously, writing and recording this beforehand, I have to assume that Harrison, she's been a consummate professional over her career. She's been an athlete for a long time, so I have to assume. I just saw the press conference as well. This is Thursday night as I'm recording this. She looked a lot thinner. She looked like she's going to come in and make that weight. So have to assume that she's going to be ready to go And honestly, Holly Holm has really looked bad over the last 3 years. Holmes 42 years old at this point. She has one win in the last 3 years, and that was a decision over Yana Santos, who's honestly not that good. Holm got submitted in her last outing and kind of dominated by Mayra Bueno Silva. Even though that win was overturned to a no contest because of a failed drug test by Silva, I mean, we just saw Silva looked awful in her bid for the title. She just looked awful. Raquel Pennington took a decision over, and Silva did not look good, and she was able to kind of crush Holly Holm. So I think that's a pretty bad sign for Holm, especially going in against a fighter like Harrison, who is 9 years younger, who's making her UFC debut here, wants to make a big statement in her debut that she's here, she's going to be the future champion and rule this division. She wants to also lure Amanda Nunes back out of retirement to get that super fight. So I think she's going to have to really go out here and dominate Holly Holm. I think she can do so. I think a submission win wouldn't shock me at all. But I think I'm going to go with decision. I think Holly Holm, she knows this is a big fight. And I think she's going to come out here. I think we may even see a little bit of UFC jitters from Kayla Harrison. But not enough to stop her from winning the fight. I think if anything, early on, Holm may have some success, but as Harrison settles in and starts to find her rhythm, she should be able to get Holm to the ground and just take this fight over. So for the official pick, give me Kayla Harrison by unanimous decision. Next up on the card, this is one of the most interesting fights on this card, to me at least, as Calvin the Boston finisher Kattar is taking on Aljamain Funkmaster Sterling. Kattar is 36 years old. He is 23-7 overall with 10 knockouts, 3 submissions, and 10 decisions. He is a blue belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He's got a really good team behind him at the New England Cartel, and he is a slick boxer. He is currently 7-5 in the UFC. Best wins of his career so far have been over Andre Fili, Shane Burgos, Ricardo Lamas, Jeremy Stevens, Dan Ige, and Giga Chikadze. He will be taking on Sterling, who is 34 years old. He is 23-4 overall with 3 knockouts, 8 submissions, and 11 decisions. He is the former UFC bantamweight champion. He holds the record for most wins in UFC bantamweight history. He is the former CFFC champ, the former ROC champ. He is a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu under Matt Serra, an NCAA Division III wrestler, and he's got a great team behind him at Serra Jiu-Jitsu. Best wins of his career so far have been over Takeya Mizugaki, Renan Barão, Brett Johns, Cody Stamann, Jimmy Rivera, Pedro Munoz, Corey Sandhagen, Peter Yan twice, technically, TJ Dillashaw, and Henry Cejudo. Coming into this fight, Sterling is a minus 140 favorite, as Kattar is coming back as a plus 120 underdog. There's currently 3,826 Tapology votes on the fight. 74% of those are favoring Sterling, with 67% taking him to win by decision. Of the 26% taking Kattar, 55% of those are taking him to win by decision. Honestly, the more I broke this fight down, the more I was surprised to see that some analysts are taking Kattar, and I was more surprised that Sterling really isn't a bigger favorite. Yes, he's moving up to featherweight here for the first time, and that does put a bit of a question mark on him on how he's going to look and how he's going to handle the bigger fighters. But I just see this being a great matchup for him. Kattar only has a 1-inch reach advantage, and he's mainly a boxer. We don't really see a lot of kicks out of Calvin Kattar, whereas Sterling has really good kicks, and he's used to dealing with much faster fighters, more technical strikers, I think, than Calvin Kattar. This is a guy who fought and beat Peter Yan. Peter Yan, great striker, more technical, more combinations. Maybe not as good of a boxer as Calvin Kattar, maybe not as much power, but faster, more combinations. I think probably harder to deal with than a guy like Calvin Kattar. Sterling is, when you're looking at the stats, he's actually the more accurate striker between these two, and he's better defensively as well. He's obviously the much better grappler. The one thing that I think does worry me in this fight is Kattar has really great takedown defense. It's currently sitting at 91% in the UFC. And Sterling only succeeds on 24% of his takedowns in the UFC. So I do see that potentially being a problem for him. Looking at Calvin Kattar, I was like, 91% takedown defense. Who was taking him down here? Andre Fili, who I would definitely say isn't as good as of a wrestler as Sterling, went 0-2. Chris Fishgold went 1-2, so Fishgold was able to get him down. Ricardo Lamas went 0-1. Sabit Magomed Sharipov went 1-4, and I think he only had like 20-something seconds of control time. Dan Ige went 0-9. Max Holloway went 0-1. Josh Emmett went 0-4. Out of those guys, not a lot of them are as good of a wrestler as Sterling. So I definitely think there's hope that Sterling can get him down. Still, like I said, Chris Fishgold and Zabit Magomed Sharipov were able to get him down. But it's definitely, that was the only thing that really gave me pause. That Kattar has such good takedown defense that he might be able to keep this fight on the feet and give himself more chances to get a win. Even still, I think, going up a division, we're going to see Aljamain Sterling be stronger. And he's also not fighting guys who are as quick as I mentioned. So, Kattar, I wouldn't say is a very fast fighter. So I think Aljo is going to be able to track him down, get a hold of him a little easier than he would a really quick bantamweight. Sterling's also really good in the clinch. He's really great about getting fighters' backs, like if you're standing. So in the clinch, he'll still be able to get to your back, and I think that's going to be a big tool for him in this fight. Kattar, like I said, he has been fantastic about avoiding grappling exchanges at all costs. If he can stop the takedowns consistently, or just quickly get back to his feet and start striking again, he's gonna have an opportunity to win this fight. But I think if Sterling can get Kattar to the floor and control him for any meaningful amount of time, then Cater's going to be in big trouble. I don't think Kattar can grapple with Sterling at all. I think Sterling can definitely outclass Kattar on the floor. So, in summary, Sterling can have success on the feet using his kicks, controlling distance, using his clinch work. Whereas if he can get Kattar to the floor, I don't think Kattar can compete with him. So, with $300,000 bonuses on the line and Sterling needing to make a statement in this new division, I do think he's going to push the pace as well, and really, try and drag him to the mat and try and get this stoppage. And I see him being able to do it. So give me, for the official pick, Aljamain Sterling to win by submission in the second round. Headlining the preliminary card for this fight, we have former champion Yuri BJP Prohaka taking on Alexander Rocket Rachik. Prohaka is 31 years old. He is 29-4-1 overall with 25 knockouts, 3 submissions, and 1 decision. He is the former UFC light heavyweight champion, the former Risen champ, the former GFC champ. He is a Czech Republic national Muay Thai champion. He has a wild and unique style, just really all offense. He's an all or nothing type fighter. He went 11-1 in Risen. He's currently 3-1 in the UFC. Best wins of his career so far have been over Satoshi Ishii, Vadim Nemkov, Carl Albrechtsen, Bruno Capoloza, Brandon Halsey, Muhammad King Mo Lawal, Fabio Maldonado, CB Dalloway, Volkan Ozdemir, Dominic Reyes, and Glover Teixeira. On the other side, we see Raychik, who is 32 years old. He is 14-3 overall. He is an Austrian state kickboxing champion. He is a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He's just a really well-rounded and put-together fighter. He has surprisingly good wrestling when he does decide to use it. He is a good striker with some power, and he has the cleaner technique between these two. He is currently 6-2 in the UFC. His best wins of his career so far have been over Marcin Prachnio, Devin Clark, Jimmy Manuwa, Anthony Smith, and Thiago Santos. Coming into this fight, Raychik is a minus 130 favorite, with Prochazka coming back as a plus 110 underdog. There is currently 3,828 Tapology votes on the fight. 76% are taking the underdog Prochazka, with 74% of those taking him to win by knockout. Of the 24% taking Raychik, 63% are taking him to win by decision. Breaking this fight down, I'm actually pretty surprised to see Raychik as the favorite. I mean, I get it. Like I said, he is the cleaner fighter, has better technique, probably better defensively, probably better, more well-rounded because he can wrestle as well. But really, if you look at the guys he's beaten, he hasn't really beaten any good competition. I mean, he beat Marcin Prachnio and Devin Clark, who are both mediocre. He beat Jimmy Manuwa, who at the time was on a 3-fight losing streak, and after losing to Raychik, he retired. He beat Anthony Smith, who, I mean, talk to any MMA fan. Anthony Smith gets a ton of criticism right now about being washed and how he should retire and how he's kind of a journeyman bum. And then Thiago Santos, who pretty much the same thing. That guy's out of the UFC. He went to the PFL where he's losing to bums and failing drug tests. So, I mean, this is the guy that we're expecting to beat a former champion here. Raychik is also, he suffered a bad injury in his last fight, and he hasn't fought since. And that was almost 2 years ago at this point. When he comes back, he's going to be fighting Prochazka. There's going to be no feeling out process. There's going to be no chance for Raychik to shake off any potential ring rust. There's going to be no opportunity to settle in. Prochazka starts fast, and he's going to swarm him, and he's going to be throwing wild shit at him. So Raychik is going to have to adapt and get back into the swing of things immediately. And I just don't see him being able to handle that well. Unless he decides to wrestle, Prochazka's takedown defense is pretty bad. So unless Raychik decides to wrestle early to allow himself to settle into the fight, I could potentially see him having success that way and even being able to take over the fight later on. But I just don't think he's going to do that. I think the energy of the crowd, he is mainly a striker. He's not a guy that we see, commit to wrestling throughout a fight. So I think he's going to go out there, expecting to be able to strike early and feel things out. And Brock is just going to come out wild and just start throwing things at him. And he probably won't be able to handle that well. So for the official pick, give me the underdog, Jiri Prochazka, by knockout in the first round. Kicking off the main card, this will probably be my fastest prediction on here, as Bo Nickel is taking on Cody Brundage. Nickel is 28 years old. He is 5-0 overall with 2 knockouts and 3 submissions. He is a 3-time NCAA Division I All-American Wrestling Nationally Champion. He trains at American Top Team, one of the best gyms in the world. He's probably the best wrestler in the entire UFC right now. He's currently 2-0 in the UFC. Best wins of his career so far have been over Jamie Pickett and Val Woodburn. So I guess you can consider this a step up in competition. He is still developing, and I don't think we've seen the true potential of Bo Nickel as of yet because we haven't really seen him be tested. He's taking on Cody Brundage, who is 29 years old. He is 10-5 overall with 5 knockouts, 3 submissions, 1 decision, and 1 DQ victory. He is a blue belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He's got some serious knockout power in his hands. He's got a great team behind him at Factory X Muay Thai. He went 1-0 in LFA, and he's currently 4-4 in the UFC. He did go 0-1 on the Contender Series. Best wins of his career so far are over Dolce Lungiambula, Trayshawn Gore, Jacob Malkoon, who he beat by disqualification. It was kind of bullshit disqualification. And then he just beat Zach Reese with a brutal slam knockout to save his UFC career. Nichols coming in here as a minus 2,500 favorite, one of the biggest favorites ever, potentially biggest in UFC history. Brundage is coming back as a plus 1,200 underdog. There's currently 3,897 Tapology votes on the fight. 97% of those are favoring Nickel, with 61% of those taking him to win by submission. Of the 3% taking Brundage, 57% are taking him to win by knockout. The people picking Brundage are just like throwing a pick out there. They don't, it's on Tapology, so, you're not wagering any money. So you're just throwing that out there in the outrageously slim chance that Brundage wins. You can say, oh, look, I told you so. I mean, that, or if you are throwing money on Brundage, it's because he's plus 1,200, so your comeback is going to be ridiculous. There's no reason to believe that Brundage is actually going to stand a chance and win this fight. He's looked terrible in the UFC. This guy should have been cut already, but he got that DQ win over Malkoon, which gave him another fight, and then he slammed Zach Reese, who, was making his debut. He's also kind of an unproven and guy who honestly might be a UFC washout. Brundage does have knockout power, but he's a low volume striker with awful defense. His defense is bad, and his takedown defense so far it's been okay, but he hasn't faced anyone near the level of Bo Nickal. So, what I've seen from Bo Nickal, it's not much because he's crushing people so fast. But what I like out of him, obviously the wrestling, but what I like out of him is he comes in with he does look like he's kind of rushing things a little bit. I think we're gonna see him settle that down more as he matures in the cage, but he comes in there smart. I would say smart and calculated. You can tell that he looks like he knows what he wants to do, and so far none of his opponents have been able to stop it at all. So I don't see why Cody Brundage will be any different. Like I said, I do think Nickel is smart. I think he's going to know that really a knockout is Brundage's only chance. So I think he puts him on the mat early and locks up a submission to put him away. Give me Bo Nickal by submission in the first round for the official pick. Up next on the card, we have a lightweight pairing in one of the fights I am most looking forward to on here, as Charles Do Bronx Oliveira is taking on Armin. No fucking idea, honestly. His nickname is bizarre. Sarukian. Oliveira is 34 years old. He is 34-9 overall with 10 knockouts, 21 submissions, and 3 decisions. He is the former UFC lightweight champion. He holds a bunch of records, most finishes, most submissions of all time in the UFC. He is a third-degree black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, a black prejide in Muay Thai, whatever that means. He's got a great team behind him at Shootbox Diego Lima. He's currently 22-9 in the UFC, and the best wins of his career so far have been over Viscardi Andrade, Darren Elkins, Efrain Escudero, Jonathan Brookins, Hatsu Hioki, Jeremy Stevens, Nick Lentz twice, Miles Jury, Will Brooks, Clay Guida, Jim Miller, David Tamer, Jared Gordon, Kevin Lee, Tony Ferguson, Michael Chandler, Dustin Poirier, Justin Gaethje, and Beneil Dariush. He will be taking on Armin Sarukian, who is 27 years old. He is 21-3 overall with 9 knockouts, 5 submissions, and 7 decisions. He is a Pancration world champion, a Sambo world champion, a master of sport in MMA, a master of sport in freestyle wrestling. He trains at American Top Team, one of the best gyms in the world. He is 8-2 in the UFC. Best wins of his career so far have been over Olivier Aubin-Mercier, Davi Ramos, Matt Frivola, Joel Alvarez, Damir Ismagulov, Joaquim Silva, and Beneil Dariush. Sarukian is coming into this fight as a minus 225 favorite, with Oliveira coming back as a plus 185 underdog. There is currently 3,853 Tapology votes on the fight. 67% of those are favoring Oliveira. 48% of those are taking him to win by submission. Of the 33% taking Sarukian, 58% are taking him to win by knockout. I'm honestly surprised to see Sarukian as the favorite here. I mean, I kind of get it, but at least I wouldn't expect him to be this big of a favorite. I get he's coming off a big knockout win over Beneil Dariush, but so is Charles Oliveira, and Charles Oliveira did it first. So, honestly, you can even kind of discount that Dariush win. Dariush is getting older. He historically doesn't have a great chin. And then when you look at each fighter's wins beyond that, Sarukian's last win was over Joaquim Silva, who took that fight on short notice and who had Sarukian hurt pretty bad at one point in that fight, and it took Sarukian 3 rounds to finish him. On the feet in this fight, I do think both fighters are capable of hurting each other, but I do think Oliveira is the more dynamic striker. I think, he's the more accurate striker for sure with his shots. In the clinch, I think Oliveira is more dangerous as he can land strikes. He can also, start grappling, look for submissions in the clinch. On the mat, he's the most dangerous fighter in all of the UFC. So Sarukian seems to be pretty confident. I think he's a bit overconfident in this fight. I think he's going to be looking at that Islam Makhachev Charles Oliveira fight and thinking he can kind of replicate that and hurt Charles on the feet. And Charles is wild, man. So I mean, Charles is all offense. His defense isn't the best. So the potential that, like I said, I do think Sarukian can have success and hurt Charles on the feet for sure, but I think he's going to be a little overconfident and looking for that. And I see Charles being the more accurate, longer striker, more weapons to attack with. I think Charles, the way I see this fight going, I think Charles is going to be able to hurt Sarukian on the feet. Sarukian is then going to try to wrestle and get strangled. So for the official pick, give me Charles do Bronx Oliveira by submission in the second round. For the first of 3 title fights on this main card, we have Justin the Highlight Gaethje taking on Max Blessed Holloway for the BMF title. Gaethje is 35 years old. He is 25-4 overall with 19 knockouts, 2 submissions, and 4 decisions. He is the current BMF champion, the former interim UFC lightweight champion, the former World Series of Fighting champion. He is an NCAA Division I All-American wrestler. He has a great team behind him and a really close connection to his head coach, Trevor Whitman, which has been fantastic for his career. He went 10-0 in the World Series of Fighting. He is currently 8-4 in the UFC. Best wins of his career so far have been over Nick Newell, Melvin Gillard, Michael Johnson, Edson Barbosa, Donald Cerrone, Tony Ferguson, Michael Chandler, Rafael Fiziev, and Dustin Poirier. He will be taking on Holloway, who is 32 years old. He is 25-7 overall with 11 knockouts, 2 submissions, and 12 decisions. He is the former UFC featherweight champion, the former interim UFC featherweight champion, the former X1 champ. He holds multiple UFC records. He is a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and he is currently 21-7 in the UFC. Best wins of Holloway's career so far have been over Andre Feely, Cole Miller, Cub Swanson, Charles Oliveira, Jeremy Stevens, Ricardo Lamas, Anthony Pettis, Jose Aldo twice, Brian Ortega, Frankie Edgar, Calvin Kattar, Yair Rodriguez, Arnold Allen, and the Korean zombie Chan Sung Jung. Gaethje is coming into this fight as a minus 210 favorite, with Holloway coming back at a plus 175 underdog. There is currently 3,828 Tapology votes on this fight. 62% of those are favoring Gaethje, with 48% taking him to win by knockout. Of the 38% taking Holloway, 64% are taking him to win by decision. This was already set to be one of the best fights of the year, potentially one of the best fights of all time, but now with $300,000 bonuses on the line, buckle up because this is going to be crazy. Holloway's moving up here to 155 pounds for the second time in his career. This time he's doing so with a full camp, though, and he noticeably looks bigger in his physique. So we're going to have to see how that plays out. I think that's definitely going to help him in this fight. Even so, it's hard to not favor Gaethje still. These two are most likely going to contest this fight entirely on the feet. And if you look at the stats, I honestly thought Holloway has a better striking differential. He's not taking as many shots as he is what he's landing. But Gaethje throws more volume, actually. He's also surprisingly more accurate, and he hits harder. I think the longer this fight goes, the more it'll start to favor Holloway. His cardio is insane, and he can push the pace in the later rounds. We've seen Gaethje go into the later rounds. It doesn't happen too often. He went to the fifth round against Tony Ferguson, but it wasn't a super high paced fight. He really just beat the shit out of Tony Ferguson for 5 rounds. But he didn't look tired, so I'm not too worried about Gaethje's cardio, but I do think the later it goes, the more it'll favor Holloway. You have to also kind of consider that Gaethje has the wrestling to fall back on if needed, even though he probably won't. Even if he's hurt, I feel like he doesn't start wrestling. He still just is willing to go out on his shield and go out swinging. So, Holloway has never been stopped by strikes either. So that's a really interesting part of this because a lot of people are picking Gaethje to win by knockout, but we've never seen Holloway get knocked out. I know he's fighting up at lightweight and he's fighting a guy like Gaethje. It wouldn't shock me if he was able to knock him out. We saw Dustin Poirier hurt Holloway in the interim UFC lightweight title fight that they had, but Dustin Poirier wasn't able to put him away. So I do think Holloway's going to be able to stick around. I expect him to be there from bell to bell, and he's definitely going to have his moments in this fight. Like, I don't see Gaethje just completely outclassing him like he did Tony Ferguson. I don't see Gaethje putting a beating on him that way. But I do see Gaethje having the bigger moments in this fight. I think he'll be able to rock Holloway a couple times, put him on the back foot, bust him up, make him bleed, land some good leg kicks. The leg kicks is something that I noticed in this fight as well, because we all know Justin Gaethje likes to throw those leg kicks, and he's great at throwing those leg kicks and damaging his opponent that way. And looking back at Holloway's fights with Volkanovski, that was something that Volkanovski was able to capitalize a lot on, especially in the early fights against Holloway. The leg kicks were a real difference maker, and you're fighting a guy like Gaethje where those leg kicks are going to be a lot harder, a lot more frequent. I do think those are going to pay dividends for Gaethje and help him not get overwhelmed in those later rounds because he'll be able to slow Holloway down. So, like I said, I don't know if he'll be able to put him away. I do think Holloway will be able to stick around. I think Holloway's definitely going to have his moments in this fight, but I do think he's going to get busted up by Gaethje. I expect a 5-round war here, and I'm going to go for the official pick. Give me Justin Gaethje by unanimous decision. In the co-main event of the evening, we have Weili Magnum Zhang defending her strawweight title against Xiaonan 9 Yan. Zhang is 34 years old. She is 24-3 overall with 11 knockouts, 8 submissions, and 5 decisions. She is the current UFC Women's Strawweight Champion, the former KLF Champion, a former Top FC Champion, a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. She is currently 8-2 in the UFC. Best wins of her career have been over Danielle Taylor, Jessica Aguilar, Tisha Torres, Jessica Andrade, Joanna Jędrzejczyk twice, Carla Esparza, and Amanda Lemos. She will be taking on Jan, who is also 34 years old. She is 17-3 overall with 7 knockouts, 1 submission, and 9 decisions. Jan is a blue belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. She has a great team behind her at Team Alpha Male. She is a good striker, and she is currently 8-2 in the UFC, where her best wins have been over Angela Hill, Karolina Kowalkiewicz, Claudia Gadelha, Mackenzie Dern, and Jessica Andrade. Zhang's coming into this fight as a minus 420 favorite, with Jan coming back as a plus 320 underdog. There is currently 3,821 Tapology votes on this fight. 96% of those are favoring Zhang, while with 52% taking her to win by decision. Of the 4% taking Jan, 52% are taking her to win by decision. This really isn't a great fight, in my opinion. It's a win-win for the UFC because whoever wins, they still have a Chinese star to help them push into that market. But I really just don't give Jan much of a chance here. Honestly, this prediction was as easy as the Bo Nickel one, and it might be even quicker. The way I see it, Jan really only has a puncher's chance, and the only fighter she's ever finished in the UFC by strikes was in her last fight against Jessica Andrade, who, if you go to the Jessica Andrade fight, I talked about how she's very inconsistent. She gets stopped in most of her wins. In most of her losses. So, it wasn't exactly shocking to get that win, and she hasn't been able to stop anyone else. And going against Zhang has more power. She throws slightly more volume. She's the more accurate striker. Jan does have better defense, so, maybe that's her hope, is that, she can land some shots and not get hit back. I really don't know here. Zhang also has the wrestling edge and the grappling edge, and I think if she decides to take this to the floor, she can really beat Jan up there and dominate her. Jan looked helpless on the mat against Carla Esparza. Carla Esparza was able to get her down. I believe she put her in a crucifix and TKO'd her like in the second round. It was pretty early. Once Carla Esparza got her down, Jan was just like a fish out of water. So I think if Zhang's smart, she's been training with, Henry Cejudo. She trains with some wrestlers, which we've seen her use her wrestling more often recently. If she does that, it won't be surprising at all to me. I think she can just take Jan down and ground and pound her out real quick. So, even if she stands and trades with her, I think she's going to put her away too. So, really, whatever Zhang likes, really, dealer's choice here. I don't expect Zhang to take too long to figure out which is going to be the best path to victory for her, which way she wants to take that fight. And once she decides to do so, I think she will put Jan away. So I really don't see Jan making it outside of 3 rounds. For the official pick, give me Weili Zhang by knockout in the second round. It's time for the main event of UFC 300. I am pumped for this fight as Alex Pereira is taking on Jamahal Sweet Dreams Hill. Pereira is 36 years old. He is 9-2 overall with 7 knockouts and 2 decisions. He is the current UFC light heavyweight champion, the former UFC middleweight champion. He is the only fighter to ever hold both of those titles. He is the former Glory Kickboxing light heavyweight champion and Glory Kickboxing middleweight champion. He is a black belt in kickboxing, a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and he has a great team and a great connection with his head coach, Glover Teixeira. He went 1-0 in LFA. He is currently 6-1 in the UFC, where his best wins have been over Bruno Silva, Sean Strickland, Israel Adesanya, Jan Blachowicz, and Yuri Prochazka. He will be taking on Jamahal Hill, who is 32 years old. He is 12-1 overall with 7 knockouts and 5 decisions. He is the former UFC light heavyweight champion, the former KOP champion. He is a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He went 1-0 in the Contender Series, and he's currently 6-1 in the UFC, where his best wins have been over Ovince St. Preux, Jimmy Crute, Johnny Walker, Thiago Santos, and Glover Teixeira. Coming into this fight, Pereira is a minus 150 favorite, with Hill coming back as a plus 125 underdog. There is currently 3,794 Tapology votes on the fight. 71% of those are favoring Pereira, with 89% taking him to win by knockout. Of the 29% taking Hill, 88% of those are taking him to win by knockout. I really can't wait for this fight. I do agree with the fans that I think this fight is most likely ending in a knockout either direction. Hill has been talking a lot of trash. He's saying he's going to completely outclass Pereira on the feet, that he is. I've just watched the embedded. Even his coaches are saying that he is the much better striker than Pereira. And they expect this to be a mismatch and that he's going to be able to dominate him on the feet and knock him out. Pereira signed into his contract for this fight that if he wins and he gets out of here, rather quickly and is healthy, that he can fight again on the next pay-per-view at UFC 301 in Brazil. So I think that speaks to his confidence as well going into this fight. No matter what Jamahal Hill says, I think on paper you have to give Pereira the edge in striking. He has that decorated kickboxing background. He hits harder. I think I've seen someone saying Jamahal Hill hits harder. Like we just saw Pereira break Francis Ngannou's punching record. Pereira hits harder. He is the more accurate striker as well. And he, despite his defense not being that good, he is better defensively. You go look at the fight, you go look at the stats, and Jamahal Hill's fights, his defense isn't that great. Hill does throw more volume. He's fast. He's a good striker in his own right. Don't get me wrong. I'm not discounting Jamahal Hill here. He definitely has power as well, so Pereira can't get careless. We could see Jamahal Hill score that knockout that he's been talking about. He is confident, and he's going to come in here and he's going to be looking to do so. But I think he's a bit overconfident. And I think that's going to play into Alex Pereira's game. From watching back the Jamahal Hill versus Glover Teixeira fight, Jamahal Hill obviously dominated that fight. But Jamahal Hill he keeps his hands low. He does stand in southpaw a lot. So that is going to be an interesting wrinkle. We don't think we've really seen how Alex Pereira handles a southpaw. But from what I was seeing from Jamahal Hill, he keeps his hands low. He's a boxer mostly, so he kind of has a lot of weight on his lead leg. And we saw Glover Teixeira able to land a left hand on him, I think, multiple times. If you go back and watch that fight, Glover Teixeira was able to hit him with the left hand. He wasn't really able to land it very hard, but he was hitting him with the left. And to me, those three things add up to not looking good for Jamahal Hill. I think Teixeira was too old and too slow and too small to just be able to implement that game plan against Hill. Pereira is not any of those things. Pereira's kind of old. We might see Father's Time start to catch up with him soon, but he actually has a slight reach advantage over Hill. He hits a lot harder than, Glover Teixeira hit hard, but Alex Pereira hits a lot harder. And he also has a lot better low kicks. So the weight on the lead leg, I think, is going to be a problem for Hill. I expect Pereira to be able to start landing those devastating low kicks early. And, I just see the way I see this fight playing out, the finish that I'm seeing in my head to this fight is that Hill is going to be overconfident. He's going to be coming forward. He's going to start getting hit by those leg kicks, and he's going to look to counter when Pereira throws the leg kick. He's going to step forward through it, and try to land a shot, but I see him getting caught with that check left hook and knocked out. So that's how I see that playing out. And I honestly, I think it's going to happen pretty early. There is the concern as well that Jamahal Hill is coming back too soon from his Achilles injury. He's been saying that that's not an issue, but is he going to have that same explosion? Is he going to be able to, push off his legs? We don't know. And when having that type of question mark against a guy like Alex Pereira, on top of those other things that I just mentioned, that Hill kind of keeps his hands low. He doesn't have good defense. If you look at the stats, his defense is 47%. Alex Pereira, like I said, his isn't great either. It's only 50%. Alex Pereira's used to being the taller guy, so he kind of just he leans back, backs up a lot. I wouldn't say he has the best head movement, but you're facing a guy 47%. Jamahal Hill's defense is even worse. I'm hating on Pereira's. His is even worse, and we don't know how well he's going to be able to move on that injured leg. So, yeah, I think Hill's confidence is great. Obviously, you need that, and to be able to go in and fight a guy like Pereira and have success. But I also think it's going to play into his downfall because I think we're going to see him go forward. We're going to see him try to land shots. I don't think we're going to see him move as well as he normally does. And when he pushes in to land a shot, I just see that check left hook taking him out. So I think it's going to happen early. For the official pick, give me Alex Pereira by knockout in the first round. And that's a wrap for my UFC 300 picks. Thank you so much for listening. I really do appreciate it. You can find me at the MMA Oracles on all socials. Please like, share, subscribe, and follow. But let's get straight into some of my locks for this card. My locks, I do have Deiveson Figueiredo. Like I mentioned in my full breakdown there, I just don't, even if Cody's at his best, if a shot gets through, the fight's over. I don't think Cody's going to be able to take the shots from Deiveson Figueiredo. So, and I expect Figueiredo to land sooner rather than later. So, yeah, like him as a lock. Bo Nichols, obviously a lock. I mean, come on. And Weili Zhang. Those two, the odds are such astronomical that you can't even really make any money there unless you're looking at some prop bets. So those are my locks for the card. My parlay for the card, because of that, I had to switch it up a little bit. So I threw Deiveson Figueiredo in. I also threw Bobby Green in. Like I said in my full breakdown there, I do like him to be able to really just stay a step ahead of Jim Miller. The $300,000 bonuses worry me for his fight IQ, even Jim Miller's fight IQ. That worries me. I think that throws a little bit of a monkey wrench into it, as well as Bobby Green returning so quickly after that knockout. But we're looking to make some money here, so we had to add someone, and I think he's a really good pick. My other one, Jessica Andrade. I just don't see where Marina Rodriguez, you're going to out-volume her. She's dealt with that. She's dealt with that on multiple occasions. And I don't know. Jessica Andrade is pretty inconsistent, but I do think she should be able to win that fight. Underdogs on this card, there's three really good ones. I'm honestly even thinking about throwing them in a parlay together as well because you can get some really good odds. Charles Oliveira, I like him to beat Arman Tsarukyan. Like I said in the full breakdown, Joaquim Silva was able to hurt Arman Tsarukyan. I think Charles Oliveira will be able to do so as well. And I see him ending up strangling him and tapping him out and getting another submission win. Love Yuri Prochazka. Don't understand how he is even an underdog. I mean, I do and I don't. But Raychik really hasn't beaten anyone good. and is coming off a bad injury, long layoff against a guy who's going to just give him no time to breathe. So give me Yuri Prohaska as an underdog. Sadiq Yusuf, I think he's just a better fighter. He's obviously the more proven fighter over Diego Lopes, and he's the more technical, more put together fighter. I think Diego Lopes has to rely on the X factor that I mentioned, the fact that he is ultra aggressive, willing to throw some unorthodox things, willing to create chaos, willing to take chances. But does that make you a favorite? I don't get that at all. I think the more technical, more put together guy, the more proven product as an underdog, I love that. And then I did list Jessica Andrade as an underdog. I've seen the odds sort of start to shift in her favor. But yeah, if you can get her at plus money, even money, I think that's a good pick. Under the radar fights, I don't really think there's a lot of under the radar fights on this card. I think the entire card is one giant spotlight, but there is some that are kind of, getting less attention that I will bring up here that I think are great fights. First fight of the night, Figgy versus Cody. I think that's going to be a fun fight. If we get Cody at his best, it's super entertaining to watch the way he strikes. And like I said, even if he's at his best, he's going to get hit at some point and knocked out. Or either way, he's going to knock Figueiredo out. So that's going to be a fun one. Green versus Miller. I think that's going to be a fun one as well. Very interesting clash of styles. I see that. I don't see either guy like finishing it quick. So I think we're going to get a technical battle there. I think that one's going to be fun. And then the Sadiq Yusuf versus Diego Lopes. We have one guy who is kind of a buzzsaw, crazy, all out attack, and another guy who is more technical, and it's going to be a bit of a chess match there. So I do like that one. This is a fantastic card. You can't go wrong here, really, with any fight on the card. I did hate a little bit on a couple fights. The co-main event and the Andrade fight, I think, are kind of a little bit boring. But overall, fantastic card. I can't wait for it. Yeah, those are my picks. Those are my locks, my parlay. I've given you all I've got for this week, and I will see you on the next one.